My name's Kathryn Oliver, and on behalf of everyone involved, it's my pleasure to welcome you to the Royal Society for the formal launch of the Evidence Exchange Project, the new knowledge mobilisation initiative we're here to celebrate and kick off today. Just before we get started, try, in the event of a fire, which we're not expecting, try and go through the fire exit doors, not the windows. So for those of you who don't know me, I've been working in this area with many of you, for about 20 years now. I don't think any of us could have imagined, even 10 years ago, that knowledge, mobilisation, research and practice would have got to where we are now. Some might say the Royal Society hasn't always historically been the great champion of social science and knowledge mobilisation, but I think the fact that we're here today shows how much has changed. There's been a huge expansion in the amount of activity in this area, and I think we all now recognise that getting evidence into practice and making the most of the research that we do is a real joint responsibility. So in the last few years, I've been to Royal Society events on the areas of research interest, where Angela also spoke, hosted by UPenn, and of course today's new project. So it is great to have the heft of the Royal Society behind this work and this movement. I won't introduce the project in detail now because you will hear more about it, of course. But as you all know, it's an ESRC-funded initiative to ultimately help us get more for the research that we do. Paul Kearney memorably described the expansion of knowledge mobilisation activity as a rudderless mass of activity. You might think that's an unfair characterisation, but I think it is definitely true that out of that mass of activity has come so much learning. And we really have reached a point now where we can start to coordinate and to consolidate learning and to identify actual gaps. And this project is identifying one of those gaps, supporting policymakers to engage with research rather than the other way around, which is more usual. The project team, Nicky and co, have set about addressing this gap with a really, in my view, a really admirable attitude of seeking to build on what we already know, trying to learn, and seeking expert input. Many of you will already be involved with the project. Part of what we're trying to do here today is to kickstart conversations with all of you. I know how keen the team are to hear challenge and input and work collaboratively with you all. And as the chair of the advisory board, that is my role to make that happen. So to get us started, it's my pleasure to be introducing Professor Dame Angela McLean, who's giving our opening address. She is, of course, the Government Chief Scientific Advisor, with a really critical role for the delivery of evidence to policymakers and the first woman in the role. I worked at Go Science for 4 years and overlapped with both Patrick and Angela, both fantastically inspiring individuals and leaders. One of the things I hadn't appreciated about having a woman in the role is that your chance of bumping into the GCSA in the loos goes up by 100%. Angela, you are also a self-proclaimed knowledge mobiliser. You might not have realised what a huge impact that had when you described yourself in that way at the UPenn conference last year. Naming the work that you do, and all the CSAs, and many of us in this room do, highlights its importance. This kind of championing is so important to help build good knowledge mobilisation practice and research. You continue to be a role model for so many of us in the wider research community through the work that you do. Ladies and gentlemen, Professor Dame Angela McLean.
Well, thank you very much, Kathryn, for that kind invitation, and thank you for the invitation to be here today, where I'm just really thrilled to be here for the launch of this really, really important new scheme. I do remember that day where I realised that I was a knowledge mobiliser, and like anybody with sort of slightly artsy physical science background, I was like, knowledge mobiliser, what's that? I'm an advisor. And it was actually quite an important step in my personal journey of going, no, this is actually a two-way process. And that is our job, whichever way we come from, is first of all to listen and then to learn to hear what the people on the other side of the fence are saying. And I honestly think there is a fence. I've lived both sides of it. I was an academic for 30 years, and I've now been a civil servant for 7 years. And the languages are so different. I think it's astonishing how different the languages are, even though I think the values and the backgrounds are really very, very similar. I think most civil servants and academics, if you sort of had a conversation with them in which they weren't allowed to talk about their job, it might take you a while to figure out which they were, I think. That would be my personal experience, except, of course, the civil servants are so brilliantly careful not to talk about politics. It's one of the things I hugely, hugely admire in civil servants. But then actually the way we use language is very different. And I've had two personal experiences of this, one from on each side. So one of them is more recent. Some of my very, very dear Go Sciencers had been presenting a truly excellent piece of work to the Government Chief Scientific Advisors. And the Government Chief Scientific Advisors thought it was rather good and they were rather interested in it, so they proceeded to pick holes in it as fast and as hard as they could, because that's what you do if you're an academic. And I had to say to my lovely Go Science colleagues at the end of it, that's their love language. If they like what you've done, if they think it's worth their intellectual input, they will pick holes in it. If they say, oh, thank you, great, goodbye, or that's marvellous, I agree with it all, they just aren't very interested. So don't be upset. And of course, it's very hard if you come from this world where the first thing anybody ever says is, I agree with everything that's been said, to hear all this absolutely naked criticism. So I think, and then the other side of it, and I'm a bit ashamed about this now actually, was when I was an advisor, I was sat on, what was it? It would have been DEFRA's Science Advisory Council, and somebody came to talk to us, perhaps I won't say too much about what it was, about something that was then perhaps in its infancy in government. And we laid in and said we thought it was all pretty silly and full of jargon, and we couldn't really see what the point was. And to their great credit, actually, in retrospect, the person made a formal complaint against us. And I thought that taught us a really good lesson, which was that the language that we would share between each other was not always appropriate. And I think it goes the other way, too. If you're an academic and a civil servant says, I agree with everything that you've just said, listen incredibly carefully when they say and. They won't say but. It's one of the things I've learned as a civil service is the word but must just be deleted from your vocabulary, but you say and. And then comes the important bit. And of course, there are all the jokes in Yes, Minister about, perhaps a little bit of refinement here is needed, or it was a very full description, which, by the way, means it's about 5 times too long. So I think there is a really, really interesting job for us all. And of course, much of it is funny and much of it is deadly serious about how do we communicate across our two cultures that are so close. And I think it's almost like being siblings. That makes it almost more difficult, the fact that we are so close. But as you can see, I'm still here, still doing it. I greatly enjoy it. I really, really love jumping between the two. I still have an office in actually my Oxford College, not in my Oxford department, and I love going there and listening to, exactly what is worrying the department in Oxford today, and then coming here and hearing the different sorts of things that are a worry around Whitehall. So I hope you can hear that I think this is a very worthwhile kind of activity. I'm particularly proud that the organisation that I'm now, I think, caretaker for, has been very, very interested in this sort of activity, and we've been making resources and bits of infrastructure that allow this kind of exchange between academics and policymakers. One of the ones that we've done recently is a directory. It's basically a very useful live list of exchange schemes between policy and academia. Another is the STEM Futures Scheme, which is a scheme that allows academics to come and work in the civil service and see what's actually going on. And I think perhaps the one that we are most proud of is the Areas of Research Interest, ARIs, which are lists of varying degrees of detail about what are the areas of research interest for different government departments. I looked up the MOD, when I was applying for the job of Chief Scientist in the MOD I looked up the MOD ARIs, which fundamentally say, we need to win wars. Which, of course, is exactly what you should say. You don't want to be telling your adversaries actually what your real areas of research interest are, but it did not help me very much with the job interview. So I think we're here today to talk particularly about so-called demand-driven approach to research policy engagement, which in the past we used to call pull, but basically where people who are working on policy in various bits of public service, so public servants, civil servants, crown servants, go out and explain to academics like many of us here what it is we need them to do. And that's a very interesting and difficult task, and you might have to say it several times. And this goes back to the language issue. I think it works in both directions. One of my first lessons for people who are academics trying to give advice into government is don't think you can just say it once. That's hardly ever been my experience. In fact, I'm just trying to think. I'm not sure I can think of a single time where we've been able to say it once. And that's including times, where eventually, when the advice was listened to, it saved, and I kid you not, hundreds of millions of pounds. But nevertheless, we had to say it about 5, 6, 7 times. And the same is true in the opposite direction. So if you're explaining to an academic what piece of research you need them to do, don't think you can say it just once. Because what they will hear is, they need the research I'm just doing. And you need to explain why it's not that, and why you think they're the right person to do it. But do be careful that you don't just give them what they wanted to do anyway. I'm running out of time, so let me just check that there's not a second sheet of paper here with things I was absolutely... Oh, yes, there was one thing I was absolutely under instructions to say, and very happy to say, actually, which is to welcome the announcement of the National School for Government and Public Services this year. I'm really very, very excited about this. I've been volunteering my services as a teacher to anybody in the room who cares to listen. And I think the idea that we should go back to having a national school is just absolutely right for our times. And I'm very, very excited to hear more about it. And I very much hope that Go Science will play its proper role in helping to deliver the science that I think all... science and engineering that I think all civil servants should hear about. And I'm very much hoping that some of that can be practical. I have some great science practicals that can be delivered without great expense, actually. And if you'd like to hear about them, I will tell you until you hurry away. So I'm really looking forward to working with the EvEx consortium. Many, many congratulations on getting this far. And I think all of us in this room enormously look forward to watching and joining in as you go much further. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Angela. That really helps set the tone for what we're really trying to achieve here with evidence exchange. So my name's Nicky Buckley, and it's my pleasure to be the project lead. I'm going to introduce something about the vision over the next 3 years before giving my co-lead at Cambridge, Alex, the chance to introduce himself. We're delighted to be leading evidence exchange from the Centre for Science and Policy at the University of Cambridge, where I've been working for the last 10 years on policy fellowships and workshops at the interface between academia and policy. We now have a consortium of 6 further universities of Edinburgh, Swansea, Queen's Belfast, Manchester, King's College London and UCL, as well as the university networks UPenn, the University's Policy Engagement Network, and the Scottish Policy Research Exchange, SPRE. And this UK-wide consortium is doing exactly what we've been talking about building these kind of pipelines and opportunities for what's called the policy to research direction of travel. So through our EvEx scheme, it's our mission to build more opportunities for civil and public servants to come to universities and research organisations for learning and exchange. And we know there have been great practices in this, but also some challenges. So we're seeking to understand what will make the infrastructure and opportunities more possible for more civil and public servants. We're consulting with people organising learning programmes in the civil service, including the National School for Government and Public Services team that we're about to hear more from the Minister, to understand where universities can contribute. We're building a website to list and illustrate courses, exchanges and fellowship opportunities, taking things like the directory that Go Science have already been creating of exchange schemes and pulling out more case studies and learning journeys and examples of the benefits to civil and public servants and universities in offering these schemes. We're talking to teams right now in the public and civil service to pilot more collaborations, workshops and innovative formats, and we'd love to talk to people here today further about that. We're taking an inclusive approach to building relationships and enduring networks, because we know those are so important in this work of knowledge mobilisation. Our hubs in Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland are reaching out to the higher education sector as well as public and civil service in the nations to develop both the demand and supply side for our plans, as well as a set of activities that will increasingly pull local government in. We're reaching out to universities across the UK, some are here this afternoon, to see where we can showcase their offers as well to government and co-invest through commissioned activity, which will become possible through our grant. So while we're just at the beginning of a 3-year journey, we're very much at ideas stage. That's why you have postcards on your sheets. We are really looking forward to talking to people in the reception afterwards and getting round. I have project managers now, Christina and Imi, working on the project, as well as the many co-leads. So we have capacity to be having the conversations with you over the next few months as you think through what activities you are currently engaged in, and are they research to policy or are they policy to research? How do they complement each other? And where could we try and do innovative things in the next few years, building on the evidence base, as Kathryn said, because we have some evidence base about what seems to be emerging good practice in this area. So I'd like to thank ESRC for funding Evidence Exchange and also Overton for sponsoring today's events. The Overton database tracks policy documents and the evidence they reference, while Overton Engage collects calls for evidence and expertise, enabling researchers to find ways to contribute. I'm sure they'd be glad to see you at the desk at the back and chat further at the end. So one of the great pleasures in this project is the people you get to be co-investigating and co-leading with. I'm going to bring Alex up on stage. Come and stand beside me. Alex works at the Centre for the Study of Existential Risk, Associate Professor, came up with lots of good ideas to go into evidence exchange. So do you want to say a few words about the types of things that you're bringing to the project over the next few years?
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Nicky, for this. I'm an assistant professor at Cambridge, but maybe one of the things that recommended me for this project, and the reason why I was interested in making a bid for this, was that I was involved, and I'm an alumni together with another co-lead of EvEx, Jack Blumenau, of another ESRC initiative to bring together policy and research, which is the ESRC Policy Fellowship Program. So for 2 years, I was a policy fellow in the Department of Science, Innovation and Technology, where I worked on a lot of projects, including with the wonderful team at Go Science, who are absolutely brilliant, and it was an amazing experience working with them. And I've seen kind of the interest and excitement in the civil service to work with academics, while at the same time I saw some of the difficulties in trying to, in finding the right academics to work with, building relationships with them, building a trusted group of experts you can go to and you feel comfortable going to with urgent questions that you may have. And those experiences and those lessons have made me think that a project like this one could be quite significant and transformative for what UK policymaking at both national, devolved, and local level can be. We are also incredibly lucky because part of this project, we definitely want to investigate some of the barriers that exist and ways and interventions that we can develop to overcome those barriers at all levels, but in particular in areas that have been underserved by opportunities like these ones, which is the local and combined authority levels. And we are very privileged to have received matching funding from Cambridge to allow us to recruit a postdoctoral research associate who will be conducting research on what are the current barriers and how we could overcome them. The previous presentation made me think we're doing interviews tomorrow for this role, and the previous presentation made me think that perhaps we should focus on their ability to research love languages. Maybe that is the focus of research and the topic they should be focusing on in the next 3 years. But in any case, we hope to develop a suite of approaches that would allow civil servants to reach out, identify, and interact with academics more efficiently. So we have proposed a number of approaches, including policy hackathons, sandpits, policy labs, fellowships. We are very happy to hear from ideas that you may have about what would work for you and why you feel you haven't been able to access academic research, but also if you're academics, why you are struggling to identify the right policy partners to talk about your ideas and about your research and discuss with us how we could try to facilitate that. I think our role here is to be a facilitator across these two worlds that sometimes speak different languages, sometimes don't know how to find each other. I think one of the ambitions of ESRC and definitely of ours is to be that liaison between these two worlds. So come talk to us either if you're on the policy world or if you're in the research world, and we'll try to find ways of matching you. Thanks.
Thanks very much. We're now going to ask Jen Gold to say a few words from ESRC, and then there's going to be a chance to ask some Q&A next. Jen.
Thanks so much. I'm Jen Gold, Executive Director of Research at ESRC, and we are absolutely delighted to be supporting evidence exchange. I think very much within ESRC's DNA is our belief that we act as a really important broker, so connecting high-quality social science and more broadly the sort of the science base within UKRI to decision makers in government at all levels who need that research the most. And to date, our investments in this space have tended to focus on bringing research expertise into government. We had some examples already. And some of our sort of more high-profile schemes, like our UKRI Policy Fellowship Scheme, which ESRC started, has now put over 100 researchers into central government and devolved administrations and what works centres on 18-month placements. That's something we're expanding, so we're moving from every 2 years recruiting those fellows to every year, putting about 50 new researchers into government. At the time, we run parliamentary schemes that are equivalent. But this evidence exchange is really a sort of step change for us. It's the first time we've invested in a UK infrastructure that's designed to enable movement in the other direction, so enabling public and civil servants to spend time in research settings as part of their professional development. And for us, that sort of does fill a critical gap. It opens up new possibilities for civil and public servants at all levels, in different parts of the country as well, and in different types of governments, as I said, sort of central government, local government, devolved administrations. And I know really from my own experience of entering the civil service sort of a decade ago in Cabinet Office, the existing provision in this area was quite sort of patchy and uneven. So your access to these sort of opportunities to really engage with research organisations, academics working in universities, tended to, and particularly sort of more formal schemes of the type that Nicky was just referring to, tended to depend on your what grade you were in, whether you happen to know about particular schemes run by particular institutions. That in itself depended rather on your sort of personal networks. And even at a very basic level, if you wanted to participate in some of the sort of fellowship and placement schemes the universities were running, it depended if your team had budget to support the participation. So evidence exchange very much tackles a lot of these barriers that civil servants who genuinely love to sort of engage with the research community as part of their professional development don't necessarily, or to date, haven't had an opportunity to. I also want to say that our commitment to evidence exchange very much aligns with UKRI's new strategy. You may have seen that we set out in part of our budget allocation process that our targeted research and innovation investments as part of our new strategies, that's separate from our curiosity-driven research and discovery research, is very much focused on addressing the pressing strategic government and societal priorities of our day. And I can think of sort of few types of investment activity we can do than really bringing civil servants who are at the absolute forefront and sort of at the front line of developing government policy and delivering public services into research settings so that that research is informing the development of that work. I just wanted to finish by just saying two thank yous. One to the ESRC team who have been absolutely fundamental to getting this policy to research infrastructure off the ground. In particular, wanted to thank Saskia, Daniel, Poi and James, some of them who are here today, for all the work that's gone into this. And also I want to thank the institutions and the leadership, particularly Nicky and her team, that have come together to develop the concept of evidence exchange and to work with us. And we really, really look forward to working with them over the next few years on realising the potential of this initiative. So thank you.
Great, thank you, Jen. Thank you all. So we have now 10, 12 minutes for some questions, if anybody would like to put one to the panel. We have some roving mics, I think, at the back. Do we have any takers? If not, I'd like to hear more about the science practicals, Angela. I'd like to hear more about the science practicals. We can say that for the day.
I've got a homemade cloud chamber. That was one of my best Christmas presents ever. I mean, it's only a little bit dangerous because it does need dry ice, but...
Right, okay, yeah.
What else have I got?
Don't try this at home.
Another really good one is, do nematodes actually attack snails and slugs?
Right, do they?
Yes.
You heard it here first. Right.
I suppose this touches on a point which would be, to what extent do you feel good use of science and engineering in government requires civil servants to be good consumers of science and engineering, or do practitioners, to what extent do you think about both of those? Yeah.
I think they will, most of them will be consumers, for sure. And even those of us, I mean, I'm not a scientist anymore, right? Except when I'm mucking about with the experiments that my youngest child feels that there's not enough science in my life, so he keeps giving me these things as presents. I mean, except, of course, I think we're all scientists, aren't we? Actually, I mean, all of us, things go wrong, and then you have some idea about what might have happened, and you try something out, you test out. I mean, we tend not to do things with proper triplicates and things, but I think much of trying to make your life work better, actually, what you're doing is taking a scientific approach, isn't it? I mean, you don't write it down, you don't insist on reproducibility, but fundamentally, you're forming a hypothesis and trying something to see if, well, is the drain blocked because it's full of grease? Boiling water, and so on and so forth. So I would like everybody to have in their daily life the permission for themselves to question when somebody tells them something, well, says who, and what's the evidence. Yeah. And I think the self-confidence to say, if you can't explain that evidence to me, then you're not doing a good job.
Mm. So I think this sort of thinking like a scientist, thinking like a social scientist, and kind of that becoming the norm, and ways in which people can be supported in asking those questions of what they're presented.
Yeah. I think, tell me why I'm wrong. Mm. I was firmly told why I was wrong today, and I welcomed it. You'll be glad to hear.
Good to hear.
So we now have a couple of hands up, but I'm going to use chair's privilege. Something I've heard all three of you talk about before is the importance of diversity of knowledge and an inclusive approach to delivery of evidence for policy making. Do you want to say a bit about your ambitions for EvEx in that space?
I think diversity of knowledge is really important. I'd be interested to hear Angela and Jen's views as well. So we've thought about the kind of usual suspects problem you can have in academic policy engagement, and that it can be people with more access in the Golden Triangle universities. It can be people who are at a secure career stage and are tenured professors who feel more able to put the time into looking for those opportunities to present to a select committee or submit evidence to a select committee and so on. So it's really important that we build it all the way through from early career researchers, that we say these are opportunities that you should be building into an academic career, is to build policy awareness. And I think it is very visible sometimes that you can, we've all been in spaces where there's not much gender or ethnic diversity, and so kind of working with diversity networks and so on to kind of bring forward possibilities for a wider range of people to contribute, but also just disciplinary diversity so that some of the disciplines don't always get drawn on to the same extent. So I think it's something that we thought about while shaping plans, and we really welcome anybody who has good ideas for us, because we will have failed if we kind of reproduce any kind of usual suspects type of problem.
No, just add, I think so many schemes, this is very much of it, is to provide alternative routes to connecting researchers with those in sort of policy world or public services to avoid being reliant really if you're working in government on Googling or personal networks. These sort of schemes bring people in or give you opportunities to go out to those settings which are really, really valuable. And I think that in itself is, brings sort of diversity of knowledge or making connections that people wouldn't, ordinarily have had, which I think is just phenomenally important.
And perhaps in both directions, we could all think about how can we make sure that the time and effort that goes into these exchanges in both directions is properly recognised for what people choose to go on and do next. Certainly for academics, it's completely pointless. It does not figure on your CV. And that is currently a truth, doesn't have to be a truth forever. And we ought to find a way of what is the equivalent of writing a paper in engaging with this sort of knowledge exchange. Notice I didn't say giving policy advice. But seriously, and in some ways, exchange actually is probably more difficult to record than delivering advice. You can say, oh, here's the paper I wrote, I gave it to the minister, and everything was fine after that. So it's hard for us to score, because I think we haven't yet figured out how to record what happened. But I think we should, because certainly in academia, until it's scored, in some ways it's almost unfair to ask young academics to do it.
Okay, we have a question at the back, and we're going to suggest we take 2 or 3. So.
Hi, my name is Carolina Revalo. I work at the UK Health Security Agency. We are a public sector research establishment, so we don't develop policy, and we do research often with academics. What do you see the role of PSREs being in this evidence exchange program, given that we're kind of in the middle?
I think that's great. I think PSREs are important part of the landscape. And as you say, you can be on both. Sometimes you're a little bit on one side of the fence, once on the other side of the fence. We think that we try to use the language of universities and research organisations when we're looking at who's providing the evidence base in the UK. So there are people who work for your organisation who are obviously producing excellent research, and you are plumbed into more closely, in many cases, than academic research per se, into the kind of government departments that need it. So I think you are also translators and knowledge mobilisers and are very important organisations for us. But I hope that we can talk to PSREs about hosting some visiting civil servants and giving civil servants a chance to get to the kind of coalface of knowledge production that's going on in organisations like yours, but also that you can help universities understand what are the needs, which I know we've spoken about the kind of visiting arrangements or honorary arrangements that are sort of you're involved with at the moment. Did you think any further about them as well?
Yeah, I think we'd say that our sort of aspirations for evidence exchange go beyond sort of binary definitions of sort of government and university settings. We see the public sector as a very broad range of organisations operating at different levels, and various public bodies, I think, captured it nicely, are both producing evidence and also consuming. So there might be some ways in which you're interacting with evidence exchange, where you're actually, strengthening your own networks across different research settings, and some might be bringing researchers in to engage that way. So I think there's absolutely, definitely a strong place for you within this.
Great. We had a question from Alex.
Yeah, Alex Churchill, Power Health and Social Care.
The microphone's just coming to you.
So yeah, my question is more about practicalities and how. And Angela, you mentioned the fact that people speak different languages, and that takes time to understand that. And I've seen the benefit of having fellows come into the civil service, but actually I've seen it. They need several months to understand how it actually works, and then they really provide really useful insights and evidence. Vice versa, what do you think the challenges are about getting public servants and civil servants into universities that are already time limited and time pressured? So just interested in your views on the mechanisms and other ways we might improve engagement. Thanks.
So I think it does partly a great question, Alex. Thank you. I think partly it goes back to trying to make sure that there's a good reason for doing it, because you are going to have to be sort of a bit of a pest, I think, in either direction, because the easiest thing to happen would be that you go on your secondment and you sit alone in a room for 6 months, right, which wouldn't help anybody. Universities are always short of people, actually. So I would say probably in some ways one of the most... I think almost all civil servants have been undergraduates and therefore believe they know all about universities. But that's kind of like saying, well, I've been to the supermarket, so I know about shops. And, the undergraduates are, in some sense, the customers of universities, and they don't. And actually, it's a very, very different culture. I found myself in a conversation with some colleagues the other day where they were wondering, well, why are the academics all so up in arms about money at the moment? I found myself having to explain to some civil service colleagues that if you lose a grant, well, you might keep your own job, but all the lovely young people who work for you will lose their job. I mean, they'll probably get another job, but they won't be able to stay with you working on the thing you've built together you all believe in. It's just such a different culture. So I think that's, even if you don't actually get the answer to the question you went to get, I think more understanding of what the world of being an academic is like. And I think one thing, the fact that it is all very contingent, and two, why is research so slow? I mean, research is flipping slow, and if you've lived in a world where research means, well, used to mean Googling and now means asking Copilot, you might wonder why does it take them so flipping long? And I think actually running a few experiments and understanding why it takes so long, why it doesn't work the first few times, why making something repeatable is so very difficult. So I think there are various things about ways of working that I'm describing. I think both are valuable, but since we're talking about the journey from, let's call it, from Whitehall to the experimental bench, for me, it would be those values. It would be those values and atmosphere, and the best way to do that is to actually be involved in the research, in my view.
And you'd expect me to jump in, Alex, and say that we think these short periods of exchange will work well, and we're going to be piloting through evidence exchange in Edinburgh, in Swansea, in Queen's Belfast for the first time, these sort of 5-day models of policy fellowships. So not to frighten people's line managers too much, to say select a certain number of policy fellows to come in that direction, because we know, and we've got colleagues here from Southampton, Oxford, other schemes, Bath, who've also run these schemes, Royal Academy of Engineering, that by going in with a sort of a limited time offer, this could be a day a month, it could be that these are not going to be kind of too startling, but they can be the beginning of something more substantial and enduring from that.
And I think the use of the word trust is absolutely vital, absolutely vital. And I was actually thinking about one of my very early science policy interactions, which took place in this building, actually. It was during the Royal Society's inquiry into foot and mouth disease. So this was after the 2001 foot and mouth outbreak. And I mean, we sat like this, and basically a whole bunch of civil servants had to come and sit in front of us and explain themselves to us. And we said, it seems so weird now. And I remember being completely astonished by the difference between, and I am going to name departments, it would have been, I can't remember if it was already, yes, I think it was already DEFRA then, DEFRA coming and just telling us how miserable and hard and awful it had all been. And obviously it had been. And then the Environment Agency coming and explaining that it was difficult, but, they knew how the water flowed, so they could figure out where to dig the hideous pits to bury the burnt animals in. And fundamentally, it was quite good because they'd all been able to use their science. And this was really about the different relationships between these communities and scientists. And basically, because of BSE, DEFRA had been beaten around the head for sort of a decade by the scientific community. And EA had not had that experience. They just had sort of a series of... They had a lot of flooding, do you remember? There'd been lots and lots of flooding in the run-up to foot and mouth. And they were pretty... They'd had good interactions with the people who study flooding. And just that incredible difference between the trust relationship between the two communities was absolutely astonishing.
I think the message I'm taking is there is no learning like the learning that you get through doing, and that actually getting some experience is invaluable. I'm sorry to those who I said I would come to you. We are at time, but let's pick those questions up in the drinks reception and we will move on to our next item. Thank you very much.
Thank you, panel, and thank you all for being here tonight. I'm Stian Westlake. I'm Executive Chair of the Economic and Social Research Council, and I am here to introduce our very special guest tonight, Minister Satvir Kaur. The Minister was appointed Parliamentary Secretary in the Cabinet Office last year and brings a wealth of experience, not just in national, but also in local government, having been a city leader as leader of Southampton Council, and is now doing, for me, what is one of the most exciting jobs in central government, with a portfolio that is really full of responsibilities that are crucial for making government work well, including things like the Government People Group, the Public Sector Reform Brief, the Office for Impact Economy, a really exciting new project looking to bring together civil society and things going on in places in the UK, the Public Sector Fraud Authority and Counter Fraud, and very dear to my heart, sponsorship for the UK Statistics Authority and the Office of National Statistics. Not an easy brief, but things without which the UK state, the British state, would not work. And most importantly for tonight, the Minister is also responsible for something that I think is an incredibly exciting project, the new National School of Government and Public Service, which is a real centrepiece of the government's plans to help give the civil service the skills that it needs to serve the public and serve the country in the future. So, over to you, Minister, to say, and we'll have some time for questions, we hope, afterwards. But please.
What a great introduction. I wish I got that everywhere. Thank you so much, Sian, for that introduction. It's a pleasure to be here today. I have really found this afternoon really insightful and thought-provoking already. I've already learned from Angela that when civil servants talk to me, what they're actually trying to tell me, which is really helpful. And I wish I knew what I do now when I was leader of a council and tried to work with academia. And you're so right, Angela. There's times when I thought I was really clear with what I wanted. And an academic will say, I just happen to be working on this. And then 119 pages later, you can't do anything with it. But I know now. It's great. So, Sian, thank you so much. I know you were an advisor to the Universities Minister, so if there's anyone who knows about the importance of evidence-based policies, it's you. Listen, we all know the world is an increasingly unpredictable and uncertain place, the impact of which has left our communities feeling let down, with public trust extremely low. I've seen it firsthand in Southampton, my home city, which I proudly represent in Parliament, but I know it's a similar story in communities across our country. For too many years, public services have failed to deliver the tangible outcomes people are crying out for, change that people can actually see and feel. This government stood on a commitment of that change, and we will not rest until it is delivered in every corner of our country. People need to trust these changes too. They need to believe once more that public services have their backs. That's why we are committed to placing sound, robust evidence at the heart of our solutions, so people have good reason to believe in their public services once again. I really cannot overstate how vital this approach is to this government. Evidence is central to everything we do. It's how we identify the problems that need solving, how we scrutinise the impact of our actions, both intended and unintended, and how we ensure ministers like me are making decisions based on the best possible insights. And Sian has said that I've got the most exciting job, so, you know, living the dream. In a post-truth world, this has never been more important because facts don't lie. They are our greatest weapon in our constant battle for the truth. Everyone here today who upholds the principle of evidence-based working, thank you for being part of that defence. And thank you to the Evidence Exchange Consortium, the Economic and Social Research Council and the University of Cambridge for hosting events like this. Your long-standing collective commitment in ensuring our workforce is skilled and ready to deliver is invaluable. As the challenges get greater, so must our efforts in tackling them. That is why this government and the Chief Secretary to the Prime Minister talk about rewiring Whitehall, and why later this year we will be launching the new National School of Government and Public Services. We need and all want to create high-performing professional civil servants that is built from within, skilled for the digital age and focused on what really works. We need everyone in government to not only be better equipped to deal with today's problems, but be ready and prepared for the challenges of the future too. This school will deliver a new curriculum grounded in research and evidence where proper evaluation takes place. This builds on existing great learning and development research collaborations with the UCL, the University of Manchester, the University of Cambridge, whose important work seeks to define what good public sector training looks like in practice. The high-quality learning opportunities the school will provide is aimed to empower civil servants to become more agile, better equip them with the skills they need to navigate immediate, emerging, and ever-evolving challenges. Today, I'm happy to announce that the school will also include a College of Experts. This will be a diverse pool of UK academics and specialists whose high-quality advice will ensure that the civil service training is built with the very best people, research and evidence our country has to offer. Together, we can and we will fight this post-truth agenda that we are seeing spill out in our communities. We can and we will build better public services that people can trust once more. I won't stop until this is a reality. This government won't stop until this is a reality, and I know neither will any of you. Let's do this together. Thank you.
Why don't you stand?
Okay, I'm standing.
Now, we have a few minutes for questions from the floor. Do I see a hand? While we're waiting, I may abuse chair's privilege. I'll kick off by asking you a question. Super exciting to hear about the launch of the National School for Government and Public Services. I mean, gathered here today, we've got some really exciting, interesting academics who are really interested in this specific question of how they can help make government better. What message would you have for them about how they can help support the National School for Government?
Listen, what you guys have been doing with government and kind of improving our public sector for decades, for the last years, has been absolutely incredible. This isn't to replace what you're doing, but to add value to what you're doing. We heard earlier, I think it was Nicky, you mentioned everything being quite patchy and it's not collaborative. And actually, this is a time to bring it together, and at a time when our challenges internationally and nationally, regionally, locally just seem so vast. Like sometimes I feel like this country is fighting for our soul. It's all shoulders to the wheel, and this is about coming together to make sure it's consistent, it's cutting edge, and we're ensuring our civil servants are asking the right questions. We're giving them the freedom to be innovative and work in partnership to skill them up for today's challenges, but for tomorrow's as well. So please do contact us. Obviously, the curriculum is being built at the moment. It's a huge priority for me, for the Chief Secretary to the Prime Minister, Darren Jones, and this government as well. So I suppose in response, please do contact us. Obviously, there's this College of Experts, which the recruitment process will be happening this summer, but we want to build on the partnerships we've already got.
Thank you. I think this commitment to evidence and to building that government capability is so inspiring to hear. So thank you. I'm conscious we want to make sure we stick to your timetable. So I think we may not have time to move to questions. We'll move to the next item, and I'm going to invite Rob to come up. But let me first of all thank you so much for being here with us today, Minister.
I was looking over there. Thank you, Brian.
Great. So
I'm Rob Doubleday, Executive Director of the Centre for Science and Policy, and it's a huge pleasure for me to add my warm words of welcome to you all and to mark this moment where evidence exchange is being launched. We've heard great things about the challenge and the importance of bringing the hugely rich kind of research and expertise of the UK in a more joined up way, in a more accessible way, to help people in government, in public policy, to reach and draw on that knowledge. Yeah, Dominic, join us up here.
We've got a table tent as well.
So that's what evidence exchange is about. We've heard the need for it, we've heard the ambition. This final panel, which stands between us and the important opportunity to get together and continue conversation over in the reception, is to hear from some of the leads of the various hubs that make up the evidence exchange programme. And we are joined, and maybe I might ask you to speak in order here. So we're joined by Jack Taggart from Queen's University Belfast, leading the Northern Ireland hub, Jonathan Bradbury at the University of Swansea, leading the Welsh hub, Andy Westwood from the University of Manchester, leading another hub. What is that?
Local government.
Local government, regional government hub.
Yeah, and Joseph Sherlock, a colleague leading from and working with colleagues at King's College London. And Dominic Munro, who's the head of the policy profession in the Scottish Government, is actually on our advisory board, on the Evidence Exchange Advisory Board, and is going to be working closely with the hub in Scotland. So we do want to have time for questions before the drinks. So I'm going to ask the panel to be really brief and just maybe in turn say a few words about thinking forward. So, why is this evidence exchange programme something that you're keen to be part of, and particularly what do you hope to achieve through this over the next 3 and a bit years? And then, as I said, I do want to come back. I mean, this is very much a network. It's very much about connecting and building these relationships. I do want to come to the audience to hear what you want to contribute and how you want it to help you do the tasks ahead of us. Jack.
Great. Yes, so I'll just start off my comments by saying how pleased I am that Northern Ireland and Queen's University Belfast is indeed part of EvEx. The timing is really quite excellent because right across Northern Ireland, higher education institutions have begun to think strategically about how to develop a more systematic approach to public and civic or civil service engagement with higher education institutions. So last year at Queen's, we launched our new Centre for Public Policy and Administration, which is focused exactly on that and provides a great infrastructure for EvEx to work with. So Northern Ireland is a distinctive context, choose your euphemism. His engagement in terms of public and civil service with academia has historically been quite ad hoc. That's good in some ways. When the right people know each other, it works very well. But whenever people move on, then perhaps not so much. But nonetheless, in a small jurisdiction such as Northern Ireland, distances are of course short, and you can convene people who really matter on a certain topic around one table. In that regard, the Northern Irish context is an excellent case and testing ground for a demand-led approach where lessons will travel. So what do I hope to achieve and do over the course of EvEx? Well, really threefold, and first and foremost is to listen properly. We've begun our consultations process, and this isn't something that's just going to happen before the formal launch of the project, but something that will continue right throughout the EvEx term. My job is to understand what exactly the learning and development needs are on the terms of public and civil servants, and what would genuinely help, right? Because there are very real constraints that my colleagues back home face right across capacity, resourcing, and time. So really coming forward with a value add to make their lives and jobs that little bit easier. Second of all, I hope to start and approach where the demand actually is, and this takes the form of co-design in terms of our workshops and exchange opportunities and problems that officials face. And to do so, we will be drawing on the expertise of the EvEx consortium. Hopefully, all of you in this room as well, and then tailoring advice and guidance to the specific challenges of the region. And finally, I really hope to help build the infrastructure and the connective tissue that will turn existing relationships into routes for systematic engagement and hopefully connect Northern Irish officials not just to Queen's Belfast and Ulster University, but also to colleagues in London, Cardiff, Edinburgh, and beyond. Thanks.
Thank you. Jonathan.
Yes, thank you very much. Just to say, at Swansea, we were extremely keen to make a step change, basically, in the relationships between policymakers and academics in Wales. So I'm really pleased the university, in its University Impact Fellowship scheme, put in some extra resource into getting us off the ground with a bang. So I'd like to name check Louisa Huxtable-Thomas and Stephanie Green, who've worked with me in these first few months. Oliver Williams has just joined us as a project officer. So we've tried to get off to a really flying start in reaching out to leading figures in Welsh Government at all levels, energising the academic community, doing survey of academic, to gauge interest in policy engagement across Swansea University and now all the Welsh universities, and to play our part in exploring the best ways of doing P2R, including the sort of workshops that Nicky mentioned earlier. I think the second thing I want to say, and I'm only going to say two things to reassure you, is I think you said, what do we want to get to over the next 3 years? I think it's... From our early work, we can see something of what the ideal looks like, and the ideal is something like self-sustaining policy engagement networks between policymakers and researchers. So we can see that working really well in some areas where policymakers and researchers in that particular area meet regularly, identify questions and issues, and within their limited resources try and get something done about that. EvEx is something that can really help those type of networks. And we can also see where they're in embryo and where they need to be formed. And EvEx can work, certainly in the Welsh context, like an interventionist force to make things happen. And I think in saying that, it's important to say, if we're doing P2R, it's policymakers entering academics' world. In the academic world, there isn't really a department. There isn't a departmental view. Academics are often islands within where they're working in their institutions there, and they think of their networks, their academic networks, regionally, nationally, internationally. So for P2R to work really well, policymakers need to join those networks, and for the academics to have the wit and wherewithal to see how they formulate policy engagement networks that work for the policymakers. That's the ideal for me.
Great. Thank you very much. Yeah, great. I couldn't agree more with that final point. So, I mean, I really hope that EvEx will help to build that, and as Jack called the connective tissue, and understand how to build that. Andy.
Well, thanks, Rob, and thanks to everybody for putting today on. It's great, absolutely fantastic to be part of the project and to be part of today. My role in EvEx will be at the local level, particularly in England, working in an area that is quite fast-moving and increasingly relevant to all of us. But it's really about building a whole wave of new institutions and their capacity and capability at the local level or the subnational level in England. So everything from kind of local government as it reorganises to mayors and strategic authorities, some of which have been around for a long time, 10 years or so, many of which feels like a long time in policy making these days, but many of which are kind of coming on stream now. But even those that have been around for a while, their roles and capacity is kind of evolving, and they're taking on new powers and resources all the time. So, the importance of creating that interface between what academia can do, what research can offer, as that capacity and that expertise is developed within mayoral institutions and kind of different layers of local government, the more we can help them, and the more we can, I think, rise to the Minister's challenge about improving policy outcomes in places. In that vein, I should say that I think yesterday Greater Manchester published their first areas of research interest, just about at the moment where Greater Manchester has become an area of research interest for the rest of us. So perhaps the timing is very significant in that regard. But there is a moment, because it all is so new, this is a moment of experimentation and innovation at the local level. But I think it's also important, certainly from our perspective, to think very hard about the relationships between the local and the national. And as, again, we heard from the Minister, that interface hasn't always been straightforward, hasn't always been easy, but understanding how, in our jargon, the multi-level governance works or doesn't work, I think will be a crucial part of both research and policy making over the next period. In terms of priorities, absolutely about helping institutions as they are established, as they grow and evolve, really getting to the heart of kind of what place-based policy is and how to do it well. And then I think kind of finally creating that kind of that space and those incentives for universities and academics, as well as for policymakers, to kind of get into the heart of the relationship between policymakers at a local level and policymakers at a national level.
Great. Thank you. So we're just going to keep going down and then open up to the floor. So thank you very much, Andy. And over to you, Joey.
Great. Well, it's very exciting to be here. I'm especially excited about this program, and I'm going to tell a personal anecdote to illustrate this. So forgive the roundabout story here. But I started in government in 2014 as a behavioural scientist in Public Health England, back when Public Health England was cool. And I was part of this exciting wave of applied behavioural science, right? It was after the nudge unit and everyone was talking about running randomized control trials in government. And I just finished a master's degree, and I was really excited to take on this role. I moved from there to HMRC and joined their behavioural science team, and we ran really big experiments, and we were just crying out for academic help at the time. So I championed a lot of bringing in academic speakers, and we had a professor from UCL, Peter John, come and do a stats program. So we had academics coming and helping us as we were the sort of scientific team in HMRC. I also, in this period, had fast stream envy. So the fast streamers would come through the team with their garish jackets and their experiences from being in the Treasury and DWP and how cool they were. And they'd be given all the cool projects, and the civil service was clearly investing in them, as it should do, in creating these sort of T-shaped people, giving them deliberate breadth across the civil service so that they could then specialize later in their career and be expert civil servants. And I was jealous. I wanted that breadth. So, and I wanted the academic guidance. I wanted to sort of, as a civil servant, develop my academic skills. So I convinced them, I wrote a business case, and I convinced my seniors in HMRC to let me go to Duke University, which is where all the cool behavioural science was happening, for 6 months on secondment. And they bit. They let me go. And I was a grade 7 at the time, so I was exactly the sort of target for this program. And I went across for 6 months, and that ultimately got extended, and we got a hell of a lot of really cool work done. So I was sort of a dual agent. I had access to HMRC, and we would come back, and I would spend chunks of time in the UK, and then we would run really cool studies at Duke, and we would inform some really cool programs, things like the Help to Save scheme, annual tax summary. Another big one would have been some of the self-assessment changes on sort of making tax digital. I could go on, but we had some really cool and impactful work. Ultimately, after about 4 years, HR called and said, "Look, this is no longer a secondment. Are you coming back or not?" And in the moment that was about COVID, I ended up not coming back. I ended up spending about 9 years at Duke, all told, finished a PhD, and last year took a job at King's. So came back to this side of the pond. And I think the sort of maybe the question that is a little open here is, would we consider this a success if this was a current EvEx fellow? Because I'm not currently a civil servant. I'm in the School for Government in the Policy Institute at King's, and my job is to run applied policy research. I teach the FAR stream. I teach the DHSC cohort. And so I would argue that it is. I would argue that it is, if we take the person-centered approach, I would argue that the skills that I have developed from being able to go into academia and learn and develop are improving and informing the civil service. So a roundabout way of saying, I'm so glad that this program exists, right? I needed this a decade ago, and I made it happen by hook or by crook. And I'm so glad that this will now continue to exist, and I can be part of helping shape it for the next cohorts to come, because I think this connective tissue, this porous nature that we need between policy and academia in the uncertain and changing times that were cited earlier, I think is incredibly important. So very excited to be here.
Great. Thank you very much. Dominic, so you'll come at this from the Scottish Government, working on with the advisory board to EvEx, so you have a slightly different perspective, but what are your hopes and expectations?
Okay, thanks, Rob. Yeah, great to be here. And I will come to that question of what are my hopes and expectations. But first, I think I need to confess to Joe that I used to be that fast streamer, and I used to be working in the Treasury. I'm now here as in my capacity as head of the policy profession for the Scottish Government. And I do feel like an interloper. I'm here because, unfortunately, Edinburgh University couldn't make the panel today, so I'm here representing the Scottish dimension, but also probably representing devolved governments as well. And just a very quick primer, because I think it is relevant for EvEx and what we're trying to do. So the Scottish Government, we are members of the Home Civil Service, like colleagues in Wales, just like colleagues in UK government departments, but we only work for Scottish ministers. We have hundreds of analysts, so social researchers, economists, statisticians, hundreds of scientists, both inside the Scottish Government and in associated research institutes, all civil servants. But I'm from the, if you like, the core. So we have about 4,000 policy professionals in the Scottish Government. And their job, our job, is in large part to make good use of evidence to make better policy and deliver better policy outcomes. So just like the Minister was talking about before. So coming to your question, Rob, of hopes for EvEx, I think, so lots of engagement is happening all the time between government, or governments, plural in the UK, and academia. But, and I am using that but word, Angela, maybe we talk a slightly different language in Scotland. That engagement is inconsistent. You know, I think the Minister used the word patchy. It's ad hoc, it's path dependent. We use a phrase in Scotland, you know, we go to our well-kent faces, right? And for me, that means that there must be so much untapped potential. We have such great academic strengths in our Scottish institutions, but also more broadly, of course, across the UK and beyond. And so the hope, Rob, is that we can harness more of that potential. And that can happen through multiple channels. But what EvEx is doing through, I need to get this right way around, policy to research, is opening up another one of these channels for us to work through. Because I really do believe, just like the Minister was saying, that, you know, how we use evidence is the difference between often okay policy and really great policy. It's the thing that will make the difference. Thanks, Rob.
Great. Well, thank you all very much. I mean, again, to refer back to Angela's opening remarks, I agree with you all, but I actually do genuinely agree with you all, both about, you know, we can draw on many examples of great things that are going on, but there's so much potential to, as you say, join them up, to systematize in a way that doesn't sort of deaden, but systematize in a way that really enlivens and creates connections. And in that vein, I know there's many people in the room here who, you know, are already doing great work to support this exchange, and it'd be great to start to build a conversation about how evidence exchange could be a platform that works
for the whole community. So I'm going to take, perhaps 2 questions at a time, which was suggested. And let's start with, I'm going to take 3. Okay, let's start with the 3 in this little trio here. Yeah.
Hi.
And if you'd be happy to introduce yourself, that would be helpful.
Sure. John Malloy from the University of York. We have quite a good relationship with a number of departments and regulators, but there's a lot of emerging technology that they want evidence about. It doesn't exist within the academic community. It's been driven by industry. And you can call us up and we'll be very happy to talk about our work. But it'll be like the minister said, you're reading 119 pages about what I'm interested in. How are we going to fund the generation of that evidence that's not available within the academic literature? Is there a method within this process for the really bleeding edge work?
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Kelly Figan-Robinson, University of Cambridge. I just have a very practical question about direction of travel. So how do these hubs intersect across, do they intersect across the academic ecosystem? Because some of them are thematic, like Andy, yours is local government, if I understood that correctly, yeah. And also just how can we get in touch and be productive and not pesty?
Great, thank you.
Owen Jackson from Imperial. It's nice to be in a room with lots of other people like me who have jumped between codes. So I did a PhD, then was a fast streamer, sorry Joe, and now I'm back in university again. And I'd be interested, more a philosophical question actually, than from the panel. I would have asked this earlier as well, by the way. I think there's a challenge with EvEx, which is it's trying to do something I think very important but also quite slippery, which is to prove the value of translation. We don't want researchers to be policymakers. We also don't want policymakers to become researchers. So how do we make sure that what we do here reinforces the value of translation, and that actually what we see as a result of it is that that ministers, government officials particularly, don't suddenly expect, okay, well, we can turn funding taps off and this stuff will still happen, because it won't. Translation takes effort. Creating products that are not research products that are relevant for policymakers takes effort. And so how do we make sure that what we end up with here is a reinforcement of that translational capacity in the UK?
Yeah, great, thank you very much. I mean, there's too many of you on the panel for everybody to answer all the questions, and I wonder if we might take it in reverse order, and I wonder if it's possible, Jen, we might come to you to answer the question about how to fund some of these tricky things at the end. Does anybody want to pick up the translation and how do we know whether it's working? How do we convince other people and the effort and investment is worth it? Jerry, do you want to pick that up?
Take it. It's maybe this again. I'm going to start with a little story that maybe cuts across a few of these. So I'm currently working on an applied project with NHS England, I think maybe I should also start by saying I have this strong and maybe unique view that I think academics are far less important than we think we are, and far less impactful than we think we are. And often, at least in the applied space, our ability to have impact and be of importance is really instrumental through the people that we work with. And those people, those sort of like hidden policymakers, are often not cited and talked about in our work enough. And so taking that as a starting point and a jumping off point into this NHS England example, where the project, without sort of talking about it too much because it's just getting started, is very much using the data and skills that exist in NHS England, which is advanced and really interesting and really cool. And as the academic, I'm advising from a perspective of the theory and from some borrowing from literature nearby, but really the value is coming from their technology and their skills and their data. And so what I would say to kind of, I think it cuts to a few points here in that this is an example of translation. And I think that this EvEx program stands potentially to put us in a position to create that connective tissue where it's not just one project or one person, but it's creating the relationship, and it's the relationship that sort of stands the test of time so that the academics can be of more importance and be more impactful because they're doing so instrumentally with and through the policymakers.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to pick up that?
I'll say a little bit.
Yeah, Jonathan, why not?
I think I can answer all three questions actually. I think the first question was, that's another grant. to get knowledge that's developed by industry. I think how do the hubs interact? We're all following a central design that Cambridge is leading, that we're seeking to contribute to the development of a digital campus for professional development and training, and identifying where training of various kinds for civil and public servants is working, where it isn't working so well, where there are gaps. That's a big focus in our early work. And we're all focused on identifying means of doing policy to research relationships. And I guess what we're finding is that you need to find an infinite variety, because I think we might start with that design of civil servants might go into a university for 5 days or a block period, but often that's not going to work, and that's not going to be possible on a long-term basis. So it's why I come back to, and I think this answers the last one. One's got to form long-term relationships between policymakers and researchers. It can't work if it's going to be in and then out and discontinuity. One's got to develop a long-term is about it, and allow policymakers to take from relationships what they want, what they need, and researchers vice versa. And of course, there is an impact agenda within universities, and researchers will see when they can have specific impacts from their research. So that's really very much why I think very much in terms of developing network relationships between policymakers and researchers, and what are the mechanisms by which one incentivises and makes that happen in practical ways.
Great, thank you very much. I'm going to turn to Nicky now, maybe to pick up Kelly's question, which is both, a little bit about how this whole thing will work and be more than some of the parts, and a little bit about how others can sort of get involved.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we came at this opportunity, we were very keen to work with existing networks, which is why working with UPenn and Scottish Policy Research Exchange, and I think it's an emergent network in Wales as well, where knowledge mobilisation networks are being created in the UK at the moment. At the local level and regional level, we also know there's a very good network in Yorkshire, a Yorkshire Policy Engagement Research Network, Insights North East. So we know that there are infrastructures, but there are also, as you say, Kelly, subject-specific infrastructures. There are learned societies, there are national academies. So we can't do all of that, but we do want to be understanding where the networks already exist. So in some cases, I know that we've talked to kind of subject-specific networks, and they might have developed a database of experts, but maybe that database of experts isn't well connected into policymakers. And so we're trying to take the learnings that we've got from practice that we've done at Cambridge, at Centre for Science and Policy, about building a customer relationship management and system, and really using that over the years, and kind of tracking people as they change jobs, keeping them involved. Andy and I were both involved in a project called CAPE, which was about capabilities in academic policy engagement, also had UKRI Research England funding, where, again, we couldn't do everything, but we wanted to help make connections, make events, make introductions, and sort of draw on people who have roles with science advisory councils, with different departments and things like that. So it's we are very much keen on the kind of the wiring of the relationships by kind of tracking who's in touch with Swansea, who's done this, which other universities in Wales are doing this, and what are they connecting into. We can't tidy up everything, and Sarah Chater at UPenn would also say she tries to boil the ocean sometimes, and I just like to tidy things up, but I realise these things can never be fully done. But we have a real open approach to talking to people like you, which is so fantastic to see people today, having a conversation afterwards. But our website is there. It's got a contact form. Please sort of enter your interests. We're really scoping. We're able to come up with pilots at the moment and fund those. So if you have ideas, please come and talk to us about them. If there's some part of the system that at the moment isn't really working, we want to understand why and what could we pilot and investigate as a result.
Great, thank you. And the excellent question that we started with, evidence exchange is a sort of infrastructure that's about connecting not research knowledge that already exists with kind of potential people in government and public service that could use it, not funding the original research. So that's not a good enough answer, but it's an answer for now. The one thing I do promise is that we will finish in just 5 minutes, because I think one of the most important things to do is to spend time with each other chatting. I think that's a very important part of the process. But there's there's time for a final quick round of questions if there's a couple. So we have time. So one there, and I'll wait. There must be a second one somewhere. There will be a second one.
A DT, if you
yeah, brilliant. No. So we'll start at the back and then end in the middle.
Or the other way.
Oh, sorry, did I miss somebody who had a question there? Oh, yeah. We'll start at the middle and then go to the back.
Hello, I'm Graham Reid from UCL. I mean, terrific initiative and many congratulations for getting it going. We've heard a lot about policy engagement with government. Do you plan to engage with parliaments as well? And if so, what's the difference between the two?
Great question. Thank you very much. And just a few rows back.
I have a question that goes the other direction. What about involvement of the end users, that is citizens and things like that? And also, how do you bring in multiple disciplines together, which is often an issue for policy? 3
excellent questions. The kind of interdisciplinarity, citizens or other kind of end users, if you like, of policy and Parliament. I'm going to leave Nicky to end on the Parliament question. Does anybody who hasn't spoken, Andy, pick up on you and end users? And Jack, do you want to talk about interdisciplinarity, maybe?
I think I was very, very struck by the Minister's sort of comments about place and kind of where people's perceptions of and trust or lack of trust in policy and policy outcomes is framed through that. So that feels like a particular challenge to all of us, but you know, because different layers of government are responsible for kind of what happens in places, but it's also a challenge, I think, to the point about how we work together. Because there isn't, you know, there isn't a kind of single place that's responsible for what happens in a particular place or to a particular set of people in that place. So, you know, in the work I'm interested in, that will have to involve talking to individual voters, local councils, politicians who are in power, politicians who seek to be in power, both at the local and national level. And I think really getting under the skin of what's happening in places and what needs to happen in place-based policy. I was also very, very struck by kind of something, a challenge I think you gave us, Angela, about how we involve kind of earlier career academics in policy engagement. And doing that as well as getting them engaged in local policy making is doubly challenging, I think, because neither of those things feel like a way to progress in their careers. But both of those things feel like a way to make the interface between policy and people much, much better. So that feels like kind of a challenge we need to get right across the board, but particularly in my area too.
Great, thanks. Great. Interdisciplinarity in 2 sentences.
Yeah, very quickly, a twofold approach to multidisciplinarity. First of all, one of the core provisions from EvEx is a range of workshops and bespoke training opportunities that will necessarily involve participation from academics and, of course, policy folk that work from a range of different disciplinary approaches, but also with regards to placements, right? So, or policy fellowships, you know. So, academics may very well operate in silos, but public challenges don't, right? So, if we have someone that works on, say, something close to the Northern Irish context, you know, pollution in waterways, well, then they can't just work with biologists, they can't just work with social scientists. You need to identify a range of different academics that that individual can work with in order to actually address that public challenge. So, yeah, this multidisciplinarity approach is necessarily baked in to what we're doing.
Great, thank you.
And on the parliamentary side of things, absolutely, we're grateful to interact with the knowledge mobilisers that have also been funded by ESRC, who are working with Northern Ireland Assembly, working with Scottish Parliament, working with Senedd, so they are supporting the in-house research teams. And we've had 2 workshops that Post have organised with us, with also the thematic research leads, just understanding the different learning kind of windows and needs of the parliamentary staff, so people working in the select committees, working in these policy research and analysis community hubs. We've heard about timescales that might work and what's being provided in-house and where to kind of fit in with that. So we realise that working in quite small teams, it can be even harder to get out and interact with universities than it can in a larger civil service department. But we got some really practical suggestions from the first couple of workshops. And I think we might even have a colleague here today who's experimenting with doing a kind of policy fellowship model, who works in one of those science hubs at the moment. And she's kind of now a good advocate for the possibilities by talking to her colleagues, because that's very much what we need, is people who've experienced this kind of thing and then passing it on by word of mouth.
Great. Well, just to reiterate how excited we are to be part of this evidence exchange programme, to be working with the ESRC, with the partners in the consortium, and with hopefully everybody else in this room and beyond, to build up this infrastructure, to make the resources of the academic and research world more available, more accessible to public servants and civil servants, to address the huge challenges that we face collectively, to address the opportunities to experiment, to learn, to build the institution, to build the infrastructure, to build the connective tissue. I think it couldn't be more important, that's what I think, a challenge for us to be working on collectively. So before I give Nicky the final word, I just invite you all to thank our panel. And then leave you with Nicky.
Yeah, we're very much now going to take refreshments in the rooms at the back. Do leave any comments you have on the postcards, hand them in at the registration desk, use our website to get in touch, and come and talk to us and give us your ideas. Thanks very much.